If you're hungry, there's meat turning on the spit outside. If you're bearing illness, find a place to lay your head down and I'll fetch you a poultice. Whatever your troubles with Edgewater, leave them at the gates and be welcomed here. Any questions, dear? Suppose that weighs on who's asking. My flock likes to call me grandmother, on account of my providing hot soup and free advice. You can call me Adelaide, though.
Excuse me, Miss McDevitt? Sorry, it's just... You got such pretty trees in here.
Why, thank you. You're Robert's girl, aren't you? I remember when you were but a sprout. Thomas speaks of you often. Are you staying long? You should try some of my tobaccorn tea. I brew it in an old spittoon, but it's been cleaned. No, dear. The garden belongs to us all. Life is the gift of the universe, and the universe yields its bounty equally, absent of prejudice. The soil around the Vale went sour years ago, but I found a way to sweeten it back up. The secret recipe is a little bit of elbow grease, a dash of love, and a heaping pile of special fertilizer. A home for anyone who's ever turned their backs on Edgewater. A home for those of us with nowhere left to go and nothing to lose. So, like the spores of the puffball, cast on the wind and alighting on fresh soil, we put down new roots. It is an unpleasant story, dear. But the short of it is that sometimes one wakes up and realizes the place that was once her home for much of her life has changed. The home in which we spent our lives has left us behind, and so we must move on. And that is as much as I will say on the subject. Reed Thompson? You here on behalf of that cold-eyed reptile? Let's hear it. What's Reed's idea of peace, then? Make amends. Spare me. Only thing Reed knows how to make is a mess. Like everything else that comes out of Edgewater, that peace offering is canned. I and my own are living just fine out here by ourselves. He would do such a thing. The question is, why would you agree to his plans? Cannery's got a regulator. You want ship parts, you ought to rip them out of the cannery's guts and leave us be. If you're going down to the plant, you should divert power away from Edgewater and toward our end of the grid. Think about it. You'd be liberating an entire town from a lifetime of service to that odious cannery. Seems the sort of thing a hero would do. You've seen that miserable excuse for a town with your own lamps. Hollowed-out workers laboring their lives away at the cannery, living off whatever scraps Spacer's Choice throws them. You know that's true, don't you, Ms. Holcomb? Your father died of overwork. His heart gave out.
He was tired all the time, sure, but he was old, ma'am, and he raised me all by his lonesome.
Look what they did to this child. Lost her family to the company, and still she defends them. It's not much of a living. Every single person in that town has sold themselves to Spacer's Choice. The company owns them. Body, blood, and bones. You've been there. You've seen it. All anyone ever does is toil over a cannery. They give their lives for some heartless corporation, and then they're tossed into a Spacer's Choice brand cemetery. Life in Edgewater grinds to a halt. The cannery shuts down, workers desert in droves, and our own little camp grows and thrives. You bring power to Reed's town and you'll be killing us. Reed knows it. He's counting on it. Haven't you ever seen a novelty paperweight? Whatever absurd accusations you have churning about in your mind, I assure you I have heard them all. I remember a Eugene. Pleasant enough boy. Whatever happened to him? Wish I could say I was surprised. That town has a way of crushing your spirit. At least his remains have returned to the soil where they belong. Except for his teeth, of course. Gold does not decompose. The teeth had to be removed. And while I am no licensed dentist, I should think I did a fair job of it. Stealing implies property. Are you trying to tell me that the husk of flesh that was Eugene's body belongs to Spacer's choice long after the spirit has left it? I cannot tell you how refreshing it is to converse with a rational mind. That's exactly right. Rot is necessary for life. A corpse is bursting with the nutrients a young sapling craves. The crops I grow here are natural, nutritious, healthy. My garden does more than fill the bellies of my flock. It keeps them from falling ill. Do you see anyone ailing in my camp? Unlike the people in Edgewater, my flock don't fall sick with plague. I'd rather they learn to help themselves by leaving that dreadful town behind. The people in this camp all had the courage to walk away from the cannery, and you see how happy they are. The Vale's barren. Been that way for years. Soil's been sterile about as long as I can remember. All I did was follow nature's own way. Death is essential to life. When the spirit leaves the body returns to the earth from whence it came. What remains is a carcass moldering neath the soil. Decomposition is a natural process, essential to new life. All life feeds on other life.
Oh, I don't know. If it was me, I'd be glad to volunteer. Keeping others alive, that'd be a beautiful gift to leave. But none of the folk you used had a say. You didn't ask, ma'am. And what about my dad? I talk to his grave every Saturday. Is he even there?
Robert is just where you left him, dear. He died too long ago. By now, he's naught but a skeleton. Whatever you say, my dear. I'm listening. That's not strange at all, dear. Few of us truly know where we are. The world can seem like a forest without end, and it is all too easy to lose one's way. But we must remember that being lost is the first step in discovering yourself. This is the old botanical lab, in Emerald Vale, on Terra 2. By the look on your face, I'm guessing you're not quite following me. Are you not feeling well? Ought to lay your head down if you're running fever. Are you talking about an escape pod of some sort? Where did you say you were from? Is that a new settlement of some kind? I haven't kept news from outside the Vale. Oh, you're talking about that old piece of folklore. Now I'm convinced you're delirious. You really ought to lay your head down, dear. Babbling only agitates the humors. You ought to try some of my purgative tea. Won't cure what ails you, but it will distract you for a spell. Maybe I do. I don't know yet. Growing up, I heard my folks talking about the Hope. Always believed it was just a story we told ourselves to keep our spirits up. Listen, don't you worry about what I think. That's not important. Worry about what the board thinks of you going around talking about lost ships from decades past. You carry on about coming here from another world, and people will talk. Talk leads to questions. Ask enough questions, and the board comes answering. No, but the board may have reason to fear you. I'm listening. I am getting old, you know. These two lamps of mine are not as bright as they once were. Or I might have seen you for what you are. Remains to be seen. Might be the man that saves the Veil. Might be Reed's personal gun hand. People around here lack the strength to effect change. Or they have the strength, but not the will. You seem to have both. A little prattling never hurt anyone, dear. You might even catch a little sense, if you listen close enough. I can't stop you from conducting your business down at the plant. I just want you to know that if you take our power away, you will have brought an end to our way of life. Not under Reed's watch. He and I would come to blows within a day, and he would never tolerate my tending to a garden. This is my home. It will be my home even if Reed cuts our power. Simple as that. That's because Reed was my boss. I was the cannery's one and only flavor specialist, you see. Remember that limited run of white chocolate saltuna? That was all me. My son worked in that cannery. When the plague started coming, he was one of the first to fall sick. We had a store of medicine locked away, but Reed refused to treat him. Said my boy didn't deserve treatment. Said the medicine would have been wasted on him. So I buried my boy in the cemetery, gathered my belongings, and left. That's as much of the story as you need to hear. I could not possibly care less if he does, but you're surely welcome to ask him. Do you hear that? That low, pleasant hum of electricity? It whispers across the Veil like the winds of change. You've done well. I would have paid my last 5 bits to see the look on Reed's face when the last lamp in town burnt out and the cannery fell to silence. Blunt as a hammer. But you're right. Nothing can undo the past. Time's come to look toward the future. We'll grow, I expect. A lot of workers out there with nowhere else to go. Not as many as you'd think. We're not about to let the whole town join our flock. Just the ones willing to renounce their corporate loyalties and live the way nature intended. I am curious. Why did you help us? You don't know who we are. You don't owe us a thing. The plant's crawling with mechanicals, so it stands to reason you risked your life. You're not quite like anyone else I've met. You haven't had your consciousness programmed by the board. You're welcome among us if you're ever so inclined. You are welcome here. That's the thing about growing old. Your eyes start to fail. Elsewise, I would have seen you for the snake that you are, chopped you into pieces and roasted you on a spit. This is all you're doing. Cutting off my power, killing off my garden. Without refrigeration, my food will spoil, and my flock will starve. I want to ask you this in private, away from the eyes of my flock, so they do not see me lose my temper. Tell me, why did you do it? You want my flock wasting their lives in that cannery? Fine. Go and talk to them. Go talk to Grace and Thomas. Look them in the eye and tell them their life here is over, and the only thing left to do is go back to Edgewater. This is now your responsibility. And you tell Reed Thompson that I will never return to Edgewater. I would rather die among my flowers than live under his management. As long as Reed is still in Edgewater, I will not return. Those are my terms. You offering to cross Reed off, huh? This some sort of twisted reparation for what you've done? Or are you just looking for a chance to sow some chaos? Kill Reed if you must, or talk him into leaving if you can. He and I are not sharing the same four walls together. Tell him what I have already told you. That I know the secret to bringing life back to the soil. The secret is human corpses. I've been grinding them up in my fertilizer for years. Marauder, worker, don't matter much to me. The human body is rich with nutrients. Edgewater Cemetery's got corpses aplenty, enough for a generation's worth of crops. Look at that. The snake's come back. I never thought I'd see the day that Reed Thompson abandoned his post. Suppose we all have a breaking point. Suppose it's time our flock made our way back to Edgewater. We must tend to what remains of the town and carry on with our lives as best we may. You're vexing to me, you know? Injuring us with one hand, helping us with the other. Here, I'm giving you something to leave us be. It's a ransom, you understand, not a reward. You're telling me you did all this just to put me in charge of Edgewater? Stranger, you are some kind of twisted. I might turn that old cannery into a garden. Got ourselves a whole cemetery bursting with bodies. I need some time to gather my personals. Long walk back to Edgewater. Got a considerable burden to carry. Time changes all things. Even Reed's stranglehold over Edgewater must inevitably yield to the attrition of time. Start anew. Edgewater will become the town it was meant to be. A place where we live in harmony with the world. Where none of us writhe under the whips of corporate masters. A place where all are welcome. Except for Reed's supporters, of course. The garden will bloom anew. I have plans to transform the old cannery into a nursery, with crops enough to feed a town. Saltuna was making the town sick. From now on, if anybody's hungry, they may feast from the bounty of the soil. But of course, and now we have a whole cemetery to ourselves.